Look out the window on your next flight, and you'll notice something odd if you really think about it. There isn't a single sharp corner anywhere on that little pane of glass. It's rounded, oval, almost egg-shaped. Every airline, every aircraft manufacturer, every model from a tiny regional jet to a double-decker super jumbo follows the exact same unspoken rule. I never thought about why all airplanes seem to have rounded windows, honestly, until I started digging into it, and it turns out the answer is one of the most fascinating and sobering stories in the history of engineering. It's a story that begins with excitement, ends in tragedy, and ultimately reshaped how we build almost everything that flies. Welcome to the lost history of everyday things, where we explore the fascinating history behind the little things that shape our world. If you like this episode, please click the like and subscribe icons. If you have suggestions for future episodes, please put them in the comments. Our story starts in the years right after World War II, a golden age of aviation optimism. Propeller planes had ruled the skies for decades, but engineers were racing towards something faster, sleeker, and far more ambitious: the jet airliner. In 1949, the British aircraft manufacturer de Havilland introduced the world's first commercial jet, a sleek, futuristic aircraft called the Comet. It was a marvel. It flew higher and faster than anything before it, cruising at altitudes where propeller planes couldn't dream of going, cutting travel times dramatically and giving passengers a smoother, quieter ride above the weather. Airlines and the public were captivated. The Comet represented the future, and its designers, understandably proud, gave it large, elegant, almost picture frame-like windows. Big, square windows with crisp, right-angled corners, the kind of windows that let in generous light and made the cabin feel more like a train carriage than a metal tube hurtling through the stratosphere. At the time, nobody saw a problem with that. Why would they? Square windows were simply what windows looked like. But then, in 1954, disaster struck. Not once, but twice. Two comets, flying for BOAC, broke apart in mid-air within months of each other, both shortly after reaching cruising altitude. Investigators were baffled. These were meticulously engineered aircraft, tested and certified, flown by experienced crews. What could cause a pressurized airplane to simply come apart at 30,000 feet? The British government grounded the entire Comet fleet and launched one of the most extensive air accident investigations in history. Engineers built a massive water tank at the Royal Aircraft Establishment in Farnborough and submerged an entire Comet fuselage inside it, repeatedly pressurizing and depressurizing the cabin to simulate thousands of flight cycles compressed into a matter of weeks. What they discovered would change aviation forever. The problem wasn't sabotage, and it wasn't pilot error. It was metal fatigue, and it was concentrated in one very specific, very unglamorous place: the corners of the windows. Every time an airplane climbs to altitude, the cabin is pressurized to keep passengers breathing comfortably, which means the fuselage is essentially being inflated like a balloon with every single flight, then deflated again on landing. That cycle of stretching and relaxing puts enormous stress on the aircraft's skin. And where you have a square or rectangular cutout, like a window, the stress doesn't spread evenly around that opening. It concentrates violently at the sharp corners. Engineers call this phenomenon stress concentration. And in the 1950s, it wasn't yet fully understood or appreciated the way it is today. Every pressurization cycle sent invisible cracks creeping outward from those tight 90-degree corners. Cracks too small to detect with the naked eye, growing a little more with every single flight, until eventually, the metal gave way entirely, all at once, catastrophically, at cruising altitude. It's a genuinely chilling thought that a shape as innocent-looking as a square window corner could bring down an airplane, and yet, that's precisely what happened. Let's pause on that for a moment, because it's worth appreciating just how counterintuitive this is. A sharp interior corner concentrates stress the way a narrow choke point concentrates a crowd. Round shapes, by contrast, distribute force evenly across their entire circumference. There's no single weak point for a crack to latch onto and start tunneling through the metal. It's the same reason a soap bubble is round rather than square. Nature settles into shapes that distribute tension evenly, and engineers, once they truly understood the physics, had no choice but to follow nature's lead. It is a design that most non-structural engineers would never think of. If you ask the average person to design an airplane window, they'd probably sketch a rectangle without a second thought. Because that's what windows look like everywhere else in our lives. Houses, cars, office buildings. It took a series of tragic crashes and an extraordinarily meticulous investigation to reveal that, thousands of feet in the air, geometry itself could become a matter of life and death. Once the Farnborough investigation confirmed the cause, the fix seemed almost deceptively simple. Get rid of every sharp corner. The rounded, oval window we know today was born, not out of aesthetic preference, but out of hard, tragic necessity. Every curve on that pane of glass, or more accurately acrylic, spreads pressurization stress evenly across the fuselage skin, instead of letting it pool dangerously in one spot. De Havilland redesigned the Comet with smaller, rounded windows and reinforced the fuselage to handle stresses that hadn't been fully appreciated before. But the damage to the Comet's reputation, and to public confidence, had already been done. Airlines and manufacturers around the world took note. Boeing, which was developing its own jet airliner at the time, the 707, incorporated the lessons learned from the Comet disasters directly into its design, including those now familiar rounded windows. Within a few short years, virtually every jet airliner built anywhere in the world adopted the same basic principle. What began as one company's costly, painful lesson became a universal industry standard, and it remains one to this day. It's remarkable, when you think about it, how a single design failure rippled outward to influence not just airplanes, but our broader understanding of materials science and structural engineering. The Comet disasters essentially gave birth to the modern discipline of fatigue analysis in aviation. Engineers began systematically studying how repeated stress cycles, not just a single dramatic overload, could quietly destroy metal over time. Fatigue testing, the kind of exhaustive, cycle-after-cycle stress testing that Farnborough investigators pioneered almost by necessity, is now a mandatory part of certifying any new aircraft design. Every rivet, every seam, every cutout in a modern airplane's fuselage is scrutinized with a level of rigor that simply didn't exist before 1954. In a strange way, we have those tragic square windows to thank for a great deal of the safety we now take for granted every time we board a flight. So why does this matter beyond the windows themselves? Because pressurized fuselages are full of necessary cutouts, doors, cargo hatches, and yes, windows. And every single one of them has to be engineered with this stress distribution principle in mind. That's why airplane doors have subtly rounded corners too. And why you'll notice cargo hold openings and emergency exits all avoid sharp interior angles wherever structurally possible. The rounded airplane window isn't an isolated quirk. It's the most visible, most literally in-your-face example of a design philosophy that runs through the entire aircraft. The next time you glance out that little oval pane at 35,000 feet, you're looking at a physical monument to one of aviation's hardest learned lessons. Of course, the story of the airplane window didn't stop evolving in the 1950s. Modern aircraft windows have continued to change in fascinating ways. Take the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, for instance, which did away with the traditional pull-down plastic window shade entirely. Instead, its windows use electrochromic smart glass that can be electronically dimmed at the touch of a button, gradually shifting from clear to a deep tinted blue, rather than being physically covered. It's a small convenience, but it also reflects a broader trend. Window technology, even now, keeps quietly advancing behind the scenes, decades after that first hard lesson about corners and cracks. There's also the matter of size. Airplane windows are noticeably smaller than the windows you'd find in a house, a car, or even a train. That's not accidental either. Every square inch of a cutout in a pressurized fuselage represents another spot where stress has to be carefully managed and reinforced. And reinforcement means extra structural material. And extra material means extra weight. Extra weight means burning more fuel on every single flight for the entire lifespan of the aircraft. So, manufacturers face a constant balancing act. Passengers want a nice view and natural light, but every inch of window has real structural and financial costs. That's part of why you'll notice window placement doesn't always line up perfectly with every seat row either. Engineers position windows based on the aircraft's internal frame structure, the ribs and stringers that give the fuselage its strength, not based on where seats happen to be bolted to the floor. It's a compromise between comfort and physics. and physics generally wins. Interestingly, there's also been a push in the opposite direction in recent years, toward windowless cabins altogether, at least in concept. Some designers and manufacturers have floated the idea of removing physical windows entirely and replacing them with high-definition screens showing a live external camera feed, essentially recreating the experience of looking outside without the structural liability of an actual hole in the fuselage. Some modern cruise ship have deployed this technology in interior cabins to provide a window with a view in a cabin that is on the interior of the ship. It sounds almost like science fiction, and for now, in the airline industry, it remains largely experimental and mostly confined to private jet concepts and design proposals, rather than commercial airliners. But it's a fascinating extension of the very same lesson the Comet taught engineers 70 years ago. Every opening in a pressurized cabin is a trade-off between what passengers want and what the airframe can safely tolerate. Regulation has also caught up considerably since those early, uncertain days of jet aviation. Aviation authorities like the FAA in the United States and EASA in Europe now mandate exhaustive fatigue testing for any new aircraft design before it's ever allowed to carry a paying passenger. Manufacturers must demonstrate, often through the same kind of repeated pressurization cycle testing pioneered at Farnborough, that a fuselage can withstand tens of thousands of flight cycles, sometimes even simulating a lifetime's worth of flights, well beyond what the aircraft is ever likely to experience in actual service before certification is granted. There's no single universal legal spec dictating that a window must be exactly this many inches wide or curved to this precise radius. Instead, manufacturers work within general structural safety principles, and rounded corners have simply proven, over decades of testing and real-world service, to be the safest, most reliable approach. It's become so deeply embedded in aircraft design culture that a square airplane window would almost certainly never pass modern certification standards in the first place. It's worth remembering, too, that the passengers and crew who died aboard those two Comet flights in 1954 are, in a very real sense, the reason every one of us flies more safely today. Their deaths triggered an investigation so thorough, so unprecedented in its rigor, that its findings didn't just fix one airplane model. They fundamentally changed how the entire aviation industry thinks about metal fatigue, structural stress, and the countless small design choices that add up to keep a pressurized metal tube intact at 35,000 feet. That's a heavy legacy to carry for something as small and easy to overlook as a window corner. But, in a strange way, it's also a hopeful story. An industry that learned, adapted, and rebuilt public trust almost entirely through rigorous science and transparency, rather than simply moving on and hoping for the best. So the next time you settle into your seat, lower the shade, or glance out at the clouds drifting past that small oval window, take a second to actually notice its shape. It's not there because a designer thought curves looked nicer than corners. It's there because, decades ago, a team of investigators in a water tank in England traced two devastating tragedies back to a shape most of us would never think twice about. And the entire aviation world responded by rewriting the rules for how airplanes are built. It's history hiding in plain sight, quite literally right next to you, every time you fly. Thank you for watching this episode. If you have suggestions for our next videos, please share them in the comments below. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the lost history of everyday things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories that surprise us with their origins, designs, and lessons learned that are passed down through generations.